All right, Ramblers, let's ramble. Special treat today. I am Dean Antonio with the Prometheus Project, where we bring information to people, information that you're not going to get from the dying legacy media. And today, special guest, Major Tom. I was going to play Major Tom to start. Major Tom to ground control. You've got white blood clots all around. So let's first talk about who you are. So you are Major Tom Haviland, retired Air Force, correct?
Right.
So you weren't in Top Gun because that's the
No,
Navy. Did you fly?
I did not. I flew
Did
a
you fly?
desk my entire career.
Did you fly?
Yeah. I went first to Ohio State University, got a degree in mathematics. Then I went and got an electrical engineering degree from Louisiana Tech, and then a master's in computer resources and information management from
Nice.
Webster University in St. Louis. Spent 20 years in the U.S. Air Force, retired as a major, and then spent an additional 16 years, Dean, working with the Air Force as a defense contractor. It all came to an abrupt halt, though, in October 2021 when I refused to take the Joe Biden mandated COVID
Okay.
vaccine.
Yeah, I can imagine. So, I mean, when we're talking about mandates as well, right? Depending on where you're listening from, it could be different from state to state, province to province, obviously country to country. In your situation, one of the reasons that I want to interview is because we're going to talk about these white blood clots that embalmers have been finding. But just I want to get your personal story before we get there. So prior to COVID, you're in good standing, got a long career. There's no Wikipedia page on you, which means you didn't go against the establishment. But at some point, you're working for the Department of Defense, I take it, and
Defense contractor. Mhm.
they say everybody has to get the vaccine, and you say at that point what?
No, I had taken a look at the data that was coming. Our own CDC wasn't putting out very good information, but their counterpart in the UK was. Public Health England, also known as UK Health Security Agency, we're putting out documents every few weeks. And one of those documents is called SARS-CoV-2 Variants of Concern. And they put out these technical briefings every couple of weeks. And the technical briefing dated 21 September of 2021, it showed by that time, there in table 5 of that document, there were hundreds of thousands of breakthrough cases of COVID amongst the fully vaccinated by the early fall of 2021. So, this is the same time that Joe Biden was slapping on the mandates on not just the military and the government civilians, but us defense contractors too. I was a defense contractor working at Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. I also knew it was unethical too. This is a brand new technology. It violated every instance of the Nuremberg Code. Nobody had really informed consent because you didn't know what the long-term effects of this thing, the vaccines were going to be. So I refused to take the vaccine, and a three-star Air Force general, Dean, had sent out an email to the whole base uh, telling everybody the dates they had to get their shot by or else get kicked out. Well, I sent him back an email, Dean, and I said, shame on you. Remember, this is an Air Force three-star general. I said, shame
Ouch.
on you. Instead of standing up for our right to decide for ourselves whether or not to take an experimental drug, you chose to spend your time trying to guilt us into taking the jab. Shame on you. And I didn't just send that email to him, Dean. I CC'd all 30,000 people that work at my Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio.
So you pretty much knew your career was over at that point,
I did.
right?
I got a call a half hour later from the defense
Right.
contractor boss that I worked for, and I was fired from my
Mhm.
$165,000 a year job as an engineer at the base for shaming this Air Force three-star general in front of the whole base. But you know what? Somebody needed to do it. None of the colonels, none of the generals were pushing back on these unlawful mandates. It was very disheartening. So I made my stand, and actually it worked out to be a blessing because then it gave me time in retirement to do these three worldwide embalmer blood clot surveys and a
Yeah.
people's blood clot survey too about this problem we're going to talk about today, these white fibrous clots.
Absolutely. I mean, now when you look back, I mean, you got a smile on your face. You can joke about it. As a lot of people, right? We're like, wow, we went through it, and we feel stronger for it, more resilient because we asked questions. We were skeptical. How many people besides yourself in positions of power said, you know what, I'm out as well? How many how many military themselves just basically said, I'm not taking it, and basically got pushed out. Do you have numbers, or do we
Not
really not
many,
know?
unfortunately.
Okay.
In fact, across all the services, I think only about 8,000 or so servicemen and women decided to refuse to take the vaccine and then got actually removed from the military for doing so. And of course, President Trump just a couple days ago signed an executive order now inviting all those people back with back pay. And I'm so happy for those people.
That's
I
amazing.
was lucky. I was in a position, like I said, I was already receiving a retired major's Air Force salary. I was 61 at the time and just a year away from getting Social Security early. My wife is 10 years younger and still works. So I was in the position where I could tell the Air
Good for
Force
you.
was on sand. But a lot of guys and gals weren't in that position, right? They're in the middle of their career. Maybe they have 15 years in service, only need 5 more to get to their 20-year retirement. Are you going to throw away your entire retirement benefits not to take the jab? So most of those people were coerced and had to bend the knee in order to, for the money. And it's unfortunate, but there were a few brave souls, like I said, about 8,000 who said, no, I'm not going to take this. And God bless them for making their stand because now they're being rewarded by coming back with back pay.
Yeah, what people also don't understand when we talk about people that are saying no and in effect going to lose their jobs. I knew them. I knew people at the college that basically lost their jobs. But the thing, the same reason, especially a lot of the young in the military, a lot of them don't have a lot of other opportunities. They didn't have a great education. They went into the military because it's kind of their last hope to do something with their life, get some responsibility. They're young. It's like, okay, you're in the army, navy, whatever for a year. What are we gonna do? We're gonna kick you out now. And it's like, you're gonna do whatever they say. You're in a position of weakness. You have no power. You're afraid. You don't know a lot. And basically, you're just going to go along like a lot of employees went along.
And unfortunately, a lot of those that did go along, as you know, did suffer some
Yeah.
kind of adverse reaction to the vaccines. The Teresa Long and Lieutenant Colonel Pete Chambers, Dr. Sam Sigaloff, they revealed the problems with the DMED database and showed that there was tremendous increases. And these we're talking about people in their 20s and 30s, right? The
Yes.
most fit people in the
Exactly.
world, and they were
Exactly.
coming down with myocarditis, miscarriages, nerve damage, blood clots. We'll talk, all kinds of things, turbo cancers. It's been devastating to our military,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
I
I
don't think
mean,
it's over yet.
you're talking about a demographic, the healthiest demographic on the planet. Most of them only die if they're in an alcohol car related accident or a drug overdose or a very rare illness. Rare. For those numbers, it was scary. So now you got some time off, right?
Yeah.
So you're not vaccinated. When do you start hearing the first time you start hearing somebody say something? You're just the words "white blood clot" or "Hey, we're finding some funny things." What's the first thing? When's the first time it came to your attention?
When I watched that movie, Died Suddenly.
Okay,
It came out the week of Thanksgiving, November of 2022. And it's for your folks that aren't familiar with it, it's about an hour-long documentary, and about half the movie is devoted to these 6 or 7 embalmers that said they were finding these unusual white fibrous clots in the veins and arteries of their corpses they had never seen before. These embalmers have 20 or 30 years of experience and never seen this phenomenon before. They'd always seen in the past what's called grape jelly clots. They look like dark grape jelly that dissolve easily in your hands. They've also seen forever something called chicken fat clots. They're yellowish in color, much smaller. They tear very easily, much different than these long, large white fibrous clots. So I watched that film, and an amazing statement, Dean, was made at the 13-minute and 15-second mark. An embalmer from the state of Indiana, Mr. Wallace Hooker, was lecturing at an Ohio Embalmers Association conference in Columbus, Ohio, on the 26th of October in 2022. And he was lecturing to a room of about 100 embalmers. And he showed photographs of these white fibrous clots that he had been removing from his corpses for the last year or so at that time. And he asked them, hey, by a show of hands, how many of you are seeing these same unusual white fibrous clots? Well, he says in the film, almost all 100 of the embalmers raised their hands, yes. He then asked him, well, when did you start seeing these? And they all agreed it was in the middle of 2021, which just happens to be about 6 months after the COVID-19 vaccines rolled out. So,
right.
I know there were
So just
problems
as
with
a
that
just as a
film. Yeah.
reminder, it was being rolled out en masse in what date?
December of 2020 is when
December
the
of 2020. Okay. And then
December
around
20,
6 months later, now you're saying
right?
this is
Yeah,
when people are starting to see them.
yeah. Most people got their shots from anywhere from December of 2020 into the first half of 2021. It's when a lot of people took their first two doses of the vaccine. So, uh, I got the very next day after watching that movie. I watched the movie the night it premiered, Monday of the week of Thanksgiving of 2022. Got up the next morning and said to myself, I don't think any reporter is going to chase after this story. So I called the Ohio Embalmers Association. They're located in Cincinnati, Ohio. I talked to their president, Mr. Dan Becker, their vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, and their secretary, Mr. David Hicks. I asked all three gentlemen, hey, did you happen to be in the room at the time those 100 embalmers supposedly raised their hands? Well, none of the three of them happened to be in the
Oh,
room
of
at the time being.
course. Of course.
However, listen to this. The vice president, Mr. Woody Wilson, who is now the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, he runs his own funeral home up in Marysville, Ohio, about an hour north of where I live in Dayton, Ohio. And he does his own embalming. A lot of funeral directors do their own embalming.
Yeah.
Woody said to me, Tom, I'm seeing the white fibrous clots too.
He's seeing them.
So I said, wow, now I have
Yeah.
an official officer, the now
Wow.
president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, a very well respected man, saying that he's seeing these same white fibrous clots too.
Well, now that you bring it up, it's time to
Yeah.
show people what we're talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share these pictures here if I can. I'm not a
Okay.
techie, so
Well, while
hopefully
you're,
this
yeah,
works.
yeah.
If you can see it, tell me. If you can see a picture.
I see the Prometheus
All right.
project.
So there's the first one. You see that?
Yeah, these are
Okay. So
photos provided by Richard Hirschman.
this is in his hand.
Yes.
He's holding these in his hand. Okay. There's one picture. This one is the one that scared the crap out of me. Dr. Peter
Yeah.
McCullough was talking about some of them was the length of a leg. I saw some online that were the length of a leg. This is
Correct.
6 inches long, this one.
Right. That one provided by Mr. Wallace Hooker, the gentleman I mentioned earlier.
Wow.
Yeah.
And then there's these.
Yeah.
And they're so disgusting. I mean, I could have put another 20 up here, but
You can
just
see
so people
almost like
understand.
they're almost like a cast of that part of the vascular system. As you can see, there's the
Right.
tributaries running off of it, which be branches running off the main channel of that part of the vascular system.
Yeah, like if you put plaster through your veins or something and then got rid of the vein and left something behind, it would look like that.
Right.
Like that
Yeah.
shape, I mean, not that texture. So this is disgusting. I'm gonna take it
Really.
off.
I've got one more live one for you too, as soon as we come back to
All
each other.
right. Okay, I stopped sharing this one. So go. There you go.
Here's another one. This one's a little larger than the one I showed you.
Jesus.
Yeah. That's cute. This one's about 6 inches long as well. This is about 6 inch clot coming out of a blood vessel in the abdominal region. So, these things, they're small, they're large, depending on where they're forming. And we believe that they grow to the point where they eventually occlude or block a blood vessel, a vein or an artery. And then that's when you have your stroke or heart
Right.
attack, obviously. Up until that time, you can have other symptoms. You may not feel anything at first as these are forming in you, but then you can start feeling fatigue, tightness in the chest, shortness of breath. In the case of another phenomenon we'll talk about called microclotting, smaller clots that form in the capillaries, you can start to feel things like brain fog, maybe have vision problems. There's very small blood vessels in the eyes. So this thing is wrecking havoc, and we believe it's being caused by the COVID-19 vaccine. Basically, the spike protein from the vaccine that's doing damage to the endothelial lining, the inner walls of your veins and arteries.
You did. So after you hear about it, you decide to do something interesting. You decide to basically send out a survey.
Exactly. I mean, because the next question is, it's one thing to have anecdotes from 6 or 7 embalmers in this film, right? But then to find out, well, how prevalent is this around the world? Now that I have the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association saying that he's seeing them. So I worked with a good friend of mine up in Northeast Ohio, Miss Laura Kasner, who just happens to be an expert in SurveyMonkey. So that's the tool that we use to develop a survey to then send out all around the world to see just how prevalent these white fibrous clots were. So in forming the questions of the survey, you act like any good reporter. You ask the questions: who, what, where, when,
Right.
why, how much. I know I couldn't ask the question who too much because there's a privacy to the embalming room. You don't talk about the dead.
Right.
Plus, the embalmers themselves, they were a little skittish on wanting to identify who they are because they don't want to rock the boat with their funeral home. So when we developed the survey, we allowed the embalmers to take the survey anonymously, so they didn't have to reveal who they were, to make them feel more comfortable. But we did ask the main questions: what, are you seeing the white fibrous clots? When did you start seeing them? And then uh, how much, right? What percentage of your corpses
Yeah.
have these phenomenon in them?
And also, I think I saw in your survey that you asked all of them, how long had you been in the industry? Just so we had that context as
Yes.
well, right?
Absolutely, yeah. And the answers to that, by the way, were an average of about 15 years of experience. So they knew what the blood looked like, before 2020, before the years of COVID and the vaccine. They know what it looks like in 2020, the year of COVID, but no vaccines yet. And then, of course, in 2021 going forward, when we had both COVID and the vaccines. So
Does the embalmer know when they're working that that person has been vaccinated or not?
typically not, unless the family of the deceased offers up that information. And more of them are doing that these days because I think a lot of the families are starting to suspect, especially if they have a young person in their family who dropped dead, died suddenly. They want to know maybe why did this happen? Because not too many autopsies are being done by coroners and medical examiners these days. So the embalmer is really the last person that obviously that sees the deceased before they are seen in a viewing, and then the casket's closed and the person's buried. So when we did the all three of our surveys, one of the other things we did is nowhere in the survey instructions nor in the survey questions, Dean, do I ever mention the words COVID or COVID vaccine, because I wanted to keep it unbiased. I didn't want to lead the witness whatsoever. So I only kept the questions basically: what are you seeing? When did you see it? And how much are you seeing? Those are the really key three basic questions we asked to our surveys. So the next thing I had to figure out was how to distribute it. So I sent the survey. We used a two-prong approach. We used a top-down approach by sending the survey to 50 national, regional, and state funeral director associations all over the world. Each of those, with hundreds of members underneath them, is saying, please distribute this to your funeral directors and embalmers that are active and have them take the survey. But just to make sure, just in case they didn't quite follow through, I also looked up the email addresses for over 1,700 funeral homes around the world and sent the survey to them directly. You
That's
know,
work, baby. That's the way you
it was
do
some
it.
work.
You
It
got to
was some work.
grind. You have to grind. Otherwise,
Hey,
the associations aren't going to help sometimes.
yeah, it helps my geography out too. I learned some of the major cities that, like in the UK, I sent to obviously London, Manchester, Birmingham, Leeds, Liverpool,
Yeah.
Belfast,
Right.
Glasgow,
Yeah.
different places in the UK. So we use that two-prong approach. It's a good thing we did too, because a lot of the funeral director associations were reluctant to participate in the survey, which was kind of shocked me in a way, but didn't in another way, because it seems like there's been a little bit of a cover up and a lid put on this by them, and it's a shame, right? Because unless embalmers and funeral directors, and later on we'll talk about vascular surgeons, endovascular specialists, cardiologists who are seeing these things in the living as well, unless they tell us, because they're the only ones that see the insides of veins and
That's
arteries.
it. They're the only ones.
Yeah, so if they don't tell us what's going on, we don't know, right? It stays blind to the public. So we did that first survey, and we got 179 responses. We could have gotten like 5,000 or so. I sent it out to enough uh, associations and then directly to funeral homes. We should have gotten about 5,000 responses had everybody responded. We only got 179 responses to that first survey, but of those, 119 out of the 179, almost exactly 66%, two-thirds of the embalmers responding said they were indeed seeing the white fibrous clots. They were seeing them and the main consensus was they started seeing them in 2021. Now, what's interesting, Dean, is some of the embalmers said they did see them in 2020, which is the year we had COVID, but no vaccines yet.
Right.
That kind of makes sense because we know there's a spike protein on the surface of the virus itself. And that spike protein is, like I said, we believe it's doing damage to your endothelial lining that then creates these white fibrous clots. But then there was an explosion of the embalmers seeing the white fibrous clots starting in 2021. And what we think happened there is that the vaccine supercharged that effect. Because as you know, the vaccine was supposed to stay in your upper arm and your deltoid muscle and
Actually, I
produce.
didn't know that. So you're
Yeah, it
you're
was,
educating
yeah,
me on that. Go ahead.
yeah, it was supposed to stay there. And it was supposed to produce just enough of the spike protein to elicit an immune response from your body for just a couple of days to a week. And then that mRNA was supposed to leave your body. And now you're ready for COVID if it comes. But that's not what happened at all, Dean. Those lipid nanoparticles carry that vaccine, that mRNA, all over your body, turning your whole body into what we call a spike protein factory, making the spike protein. And there's been papers out there that have shown that's doing that for months, maybe even indefinitely, as far as Dr. McCullough is concerned. So now we believe that it's supercharged now the formation of these white fibrous clots because the vaccine's producing much more spike protein than the virus ever could.
That's
So,
really interesting because some people are going to they would look at the results and say, look, there's 5 embalmers that say they saw it in 2017, right, or whatever,
and there
2019,
were a few that,
and there were
yeah,
a few, but then you have the big jump. The other thing that one of the reasons why we want everyone on the survey is so that we don't get a situation where the people that are responding to the survey are the ones that are like, holy shit, something's going on. We need, I need to do this survey. We need everyone to do the survey, right? You need the
correct.
biggest sample possible. So it's quite sad that out of 5,000 people, you get like 179.
It's
But
also sad that a retired Air Force major has to take this task on.
yeah.
Why isn't the CDC or the FDA doing this?
Or why
Why
isn't a
aren't
journalist doing it?
right? Or why aren't the associations doing it themselves? These state associations, funeral director associations, the province ones, why aren't they, doing their own survey amongst their own membership, right? They could do it too, because many of them, most of them, in fact, on their own websites, they have a mission statement or a code of ethics, and they talk about how it's their responsibility to investigate when there's something going on that's affecting embalming. I can tell you these things were affecting embalming because when embalmers are finding the corpses riddled with these clots, it's lengthened the time that it takes to do an embalming from about an hour and a half to now about 2.5 hours because they got to keep stopping to take the clots out.
Yeah, Dr. McCullough said like some of them, they're like literally yanking on them, like
Correct.
just to pull them
Yeah.
out. Were you hearing from embalm? Like, did you actually talk to embalmers that were saying, look, I'm getting pressured not to say anything, or I reported it and they told me to shut up? Are you hearing any of these stories, or have you just focused
Yeah.
on the survey kind of part of it
No,
and
I
just
had a chance to visit with Richard Hirschman, who's the main embalmer in the Died Suddenly film. I went down last year, actually 2 years, about a year and a half ago, to Alabama, where he's a trade embalmer. So Richard actually embalms has contract with about a dozen different funeral homes and does embalming for each one.
I'm
And
calling
we were
him
both,
next, by the way. I'm gonna try and I think we can get him
yes,
on as well
yes.
to
And
talk about
Richard,
the other side of it.
absolutely. And Richard, he's been extremely busy lately,
Yeah.
but he does want to get an interview with you. But I went down there because famous TV reporter Cheryl Atkinson here in the United States used to be CBS. Now she does a TV show called Full Measure in the United States. It's about a half-hour nationally syndicated show. Well, Cheryl came down to Alabama to interview both myself and Richard Hirschman. And before I went down the day or so before, just to talk to Richard and be with him a little bit before our interview. And when I was there, he took me around to about three of the funeral homes that he works with. Every single one of the employees at the funeral home acknowledged that they're seeing the white fibrous clots too, privately,
Right.
but they don't want to come out and talk about it publicly. So they leave it to just a few people like the Richard Hirschmans, John O'Looney's another. He's a famous funeral director over in the UK who's been outspoken about the clots too. But very few embalmers or funeral directors have come forward, and I applaud them for their bravery. And you think about what if they had all come forward 4 years ago when this started?
At the same
Maybe
time. At the same
yeah,
time. Yeah.
yeah, maybe these products would have been taken off the market 4 years ago instead of So it's the cowardice that's really kept this thing going, and it's unfortunate. It
Yeah, and
really
even
is.
on the research scientific side, I mean, look, you got thousands of doctors signing the Great Barrington Declaration, but that didn't, you'd think that there's strength in numbers, but you're dealing with, what Mike Benz would call the blob, right?
Yeah,
You're dealing with government, you're dealing with oligarchs, you're dealing with the media that's basically an extension now of the government, and they'll propagandize you. Um, I tried, I sent out about 20 emails to funeral homes saying, hey, will your embalmer like just have a conversation? I got zero responses.
wow. I
So
know.
I'm not surprised at what you said there.
Yeah, you know what I've been up against.
Yeah.
The last main result of that very first survey that we had 179 responses to was that 30% of those embalmers, excuse me, the embalmers were seeing the white fibrous clots in 30% of their corpses, Dean. 30%. Yeah, this is not a rare
That's
phenomenon. These
insane.
things are
Yeah.
prevalent. Yeah.
This is something that like right now everybody in the media should be talking about this. Journalists should be looking at this. This should be a conversation at Tim Hortons or Dunkin' Donuts. This is something that people need to talk about. And full disclosure, like I don't know what the answer is. I'm not a scientist. I'm not an embalmer. I don't know any of this. All I'm saying is let's get to the bottom of it. But
Bingo.
the resistance is incredible, isn't it?
Yeah, and I've done everything I can to force the issue. About 3 months ago, I actually went to Hershey, Pennsylvania, and paid $1,600 so I could meet Tucker Carlson in person and hand him and his team 3 vials of these clots. So Tucker's got 3 vials of these clots, and I told him, yeah, I said basically, Tucker, let me introduce you to the most spectacular side effect of the COVID-19 vaccines. And he said, is this for real? I said, it's for real, Tucker, as I handed him the vial. And then he said, I'm sure glad I didn't get the vaccine.
Well, this is a lot of people are saying now, right? They're saying,
Yeah,
well, I'm
exactly.
glad I only got one, or I'm glad I only got two. And, Dr. McCullough said something that was really interesting, and it tells you everything when he said that young people are still getting pressured to get the vaccine. But he said, I don't know if he was talking about his mother, his mother-in-law, who's in a funeral home, who's like in her 70s or 80s, and there's no table there for vaccines. There's nobody. Hey, next Tuesday, we're all getting our boosters. Everybody line up after we do
Oh,
shuffleboard and eat our prunes. No, none of that.
wow.
That tells you something.
It does. Another way I'm trying to force the issue, Dean, is in a couple of weeks here, the Republicans are having their big conservative gathering in Washington, D.C., CPAC.
Yeah.
And I went last year. CPAC last year, actually, Dr. Robert Malone had a COVID crisis summit in conjunction with CPAC at the same location, the Gaylord Convention Center there in National Harbor. And I went last year, so I went to that conference. Then I would go to CPAC on the Saturday, and then more of the conference on Sunday. And then we went to the Senate to speak with Senator Ron Johnson and did a hearing with him on Monday of that week. That was all great. But this year, Malone's not having that conference. So I went ahead and bought a ticket to CPAC anyways, because I'm going to go around CPAC all that time. They have a big radio row there, and there's going to be a lot of politicians there, right?
Right. Yeah.
I'm going to be showing this to the whole audience, right? And I actually have a T-shirt I had made up. I don't have it here, but the T-shirt I have it on the front of it, Dean. It says, "Trump, please renounce the COVID jabs." And on the back of the T-shirt, it says, "Not 100 million saved, but 17 million killed," which we know
Yeah. I mean, as we all know, the vaccine
from.
is both safe and effective and will cure baldness, and it will save you. So that's for YouTube. Um, the is there I know somebody who went to that CPAC last year, and they actually heard Dr. Malone speak, which was quite incredible. And he had told me that some people are actually talking a little bit about the clots, and that would have been about a year ago, right?
Yeah, and
But
I've
now it's like it should be on everyone's
it
uh,
should be. It should be. And
radar.
and, and in fact, a couple of times last year I went to there was a rally for J.D. Vance. I'm from Ohio, and he was, at that time was running for senator to defeat Sherrod Brown, another senator, Democrat senator in Ohio, and take his place as a Republican senator. And he won that race. But he came here with Donald Trump, Bernie Moreno, who else? Christy Nome. They were all here at this
Yeah.
rally, and I went through the crowd before and during the rally with that same T-shirt on and showing them the vial of the clots. And almost all of Donald Trump's most avid supporters were. Nobody heckled me. Nobody said, put that away. Nobody take that T-shirt off or whatever. They get it. They said, in fact, most of them were saying, "Hey, I'm proud I didn't get the jab," or "Hey, I know somebody in my family or a friend of mine who got injured by the jab." So the time is right. Most Americans, and I think most Canadians too, have stopped taking these jabs. So I think it's the time is right for us to address this issue and get these things off the market.
Yeah, I mean the culture has changed. So what I generally see is that people aren't getting anymore, but they don't want to talk about it. They're pretending that they don't know.
Mhm.
Oh, I don't follow it anymore. I don't know. These are the same people that were bullies at the beginning. They were
Hmm.
bullies. They bullied people. And I'm like, oh, I don't know. No, I don't need it anymore. And it's like all of a sudden now you're so anti-scientific and you don't listen to the science all of a sudden
Yeah,
now. Because
that's right.
the same people that are saying that you should have taken it 4 years ago are still saying it. And in many countries, it's still the official standard medical care, right? And by the way, when people think that, oh, Donald Trump, just get rid of it. That's crazy. And it's like, well, there's countries that have already done that. There's countries that
Exactly,
have
Dean.
already gotten rid of it. You're not going to be the first.
Exactly. Well said. Because you're right. America's way behind, and I I can't. I watch a lot of pro and college football here in the U.S., and I can't get away from those commercials where they're keep telling you to take the jab, and for 6 months and up. Like you say,
Yes.
it's tragic. It really is. So I'm going to stay on top of this issue and try to keep it front and center in the politician's eye. Like I said, I'm going to make myself as visible at CPAC as possible, and we'll see what happens.
Are you getting
But
traction? Are you getting help? Are you getting people who say want to work with you? Alliances?
I'm in contact with people like Peter McCullough, Ryan Cole, Pierre Corey.
Oh,
You
those are
know,
some pretty good names.
it's a pretty good names. Yeah, we will communicate back and forth via email. I send emails to RFK Jr., Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, so they know this is happening. And hopefully Bobby will get confirmed, and so will Jay Bhattacharya for the NIH, and we'll be able to be on our way in terms of getting these things taken off the market. So it's going to be an uphill battle though, because there's a lot of how powerful big pharma is. They're very
Yeah.
powerful.
And the interesting, so I come from a politics background, actually not a health background,
Yeah.
mostly human rights, but free speech. But it was interesting when you talked about, we needed people back then to say something, right? The idea of standing up, being a heterodox and not listening to the orthodoxy and saying, you know what, I got a problem with this. I'm skeptical. I want to ask questions. To be the first one to do that is very difficult. It's easy now for everybody to say, "Oh yeah, there was this, and the lockdowns were bad, and blah blah blah." And you know what? I think we shouldn't do that. It's like, yeah, thanks. Now we needed you years ago when people were losing their jobs, when nurses were getting fired, and that's why I admired Malone, McCullough, Bhattacharya, John Campbell. They
Mhm.
stood up at the time that it was the most dangerous. They
Mhm.
lost money. They were smeared. People lost jobs. Look at Martin Kulldorff. He lost his job.
Mhm. Right.
And we need people to stand up, to speak out when you see tyranny. And unfortunately, we didn't have enough people speaking out.
I consider all those people you just mentioned to be heroes, and they're all over the world. I was watching a YouTube video or a Substack video the other day of a woman. I think her name is Iris uh, Ko, I think is her last name. She's in Singapore, and she was just a music teacher who stood up to, and they're Singapore's a beautiful country. I don't know if you've ever been there before. I've been there a
Never.
couple of times. Yeah, there was a military program. We were upgrading jets, F-16s for the country of Singapore. That was the last program I was working on, in fact, before I was fired from my job. So I got a chance to travel to Singapore. Beautiful country outwardly, but inwardly, there's people are crying because they're living under tyranny. If you say anything at all negative about your government, you get slapped down. You can get slapped down hard. And this woman, this brave music teacher, was brave enough to say, I don't think we should be taking these shots. I don't want to take this shot. And you love those kind of people because they're the ones that really stuck their neck out on the line. And she was jailed for that. She went to jail. She's still being harassed by the government to this day. So, she's out there battling hard for freedom for people, for
Yeah.
freedom for other
Well,
people.
for bodily autonomy.
Amen. Amen.
This is the thing too. So obviously, I mean, you couldn't have been in the Air Force and been a defense contract without knowing politics.
Right.
If you watched the confirmation hearings in my lifetime, I can't believe that I'm seeing people on the left, seeing Democrats in the United States basically defending big pharma to the extent like it's their children, like
I
you've
know.
offended their children. I've never seen it. And the parties have switched. It is so bizarre.
Yeah, the Democrats used to not trust big business and big pharma.
Never. I've had arguments with liberals on campus over big pharma for years. They despised big pharma. The big joke from one of the profs that I used to work with was, "Oh, big pharma, all these billions of dollars, and all they can do is come up with, with foot fungus powder or something like that," right? Just mocking it. And then,
Yeah,
soon as the lockdown started, it became political. He chose his side, and it was, give me my meds, give me my shot.
it
I
was
can't.
something.
You're a conspiracy theorist. You're a nut. You're a Trumper. All of a sudden you're a Trumper because you're skeptical about certain
Yeah,
science, which was the strangest thing. And I
yeah.
heard that in Canada. I'm in a diner and somebody says, "Oh, what are you, a Trumper?" Because I wasn't vaccinated, and he had been out of office for 3 years.
It's nuts. It
Have you
really
ever
is.
seen anything? I mean, you've seen crazy politics in your lifetime, right?
Yeah. Jimmy Dore, the comedian, talks about the
Oh,
same thing you're talking about as well. That, yeah, it was just crazy because, Jimmy was actually got injured by the vaccine.
he did.
Uh, yeah, he did. He's got
Were you on a
paralyzed.
show?
No, I haven't been on a show,
Okay.
but I've went and seen his show a couple of times.
So
I've
did
actually
I.
put me on
He's
his show.
awesome.
Yeah, yeah. But he does a good bit about the whole thing about, your people were shamed because they were doing their own research. What are you going to do your own
You're
research?
going to read?
Yeah, yeah,
We
yeah,
used to
yeah,
call it reading, he said. He
yeah.
said we used to call it reading. And
That's
by the
what.
way, it
Yeah,
was always the left more than the right that would say, go do your research, get a second opinion. Holistic, right? You gotta look at other forms of medicine because you can't
right.
trust big pharma.
Yeah, it's
It goes
totally
to show
flipped.
you. I mean, we're just partisan hacks, aren't we? As human beings, we just pick our side. And even when it comes to something as scary as a person's health, people will just choose sides.
Yeah. I'd like to think that though some of us on our side are more critical thinkers, though. Like I said, I've been a conservative all my life. I'm a fan of Donald Trump, but on this one issue, I'm against him because he has not come to a full acknowledgement that these vaccines are, I believe, very dangerous. So, uh,
Yeah,
the second survey we did, by the way, we got more responses, Dean. We had 179 responses to the first survey. The one we did at the end of 2023, we got 269 responses. The percentage of embalmers seeing the white fibrous clots went up to 73%. Yeah, and then they were seeing them in an average of 20% of their corpses. So that went down a little bit from the first year, from 30% to, but they were still seeing them in their corpses.
I think you're gonna. I think as more people actually do the survey, you might see the number maybe go down, which isn't. That's not a bad thing. It just means
Well,
it's a more accurate number,
you spoke too soon
right?
though,
Uh
because
oh.
the most
Uh
recent survey,
oh. Uh oh. Okay.
yeah, in the latest survey in 2024, we had our most responses ever. We had a 301 responses, so we got up from the 269 up to 301 responses. So we're going the right direction. Not as much as I'd like to see, but what was really bizarre, Dean, is my best performer from the 2023 survey was the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. Their embalmers in just 2 days they provided 125 responses to my survey. They forwarded my survey out, and yeah, so I had 125 responses in the 2023 survey from just that one state alone. But in this current survey, I got nothing from them, in spite of the fact their own president has said he's seen unusual clotting problems. I've got an email from here.
Wow.
Let me read it to you, okay?
Okay.
This is from the president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. It says email dated 20 November 2024. It says, "Hey Tom, I'll see what I can do." And he's talking about trying to get permission from his executive board to send the survey out again this year to all the embalmers in Pennsylvania so they can take it. He says, "I was one of the embalmers who responded to the survey last year regarding the clot situation. So I do recognize this to be a current situation. I see," and he names the name of a colleague here on this email, and he and I do quite a bit of chatting together about it, and I do help their firm when he's away, so I do see the same things that he's experiencing. More concerning for me is the poor distribution I've been experiencing to the extremities, clots aside. Nearly every person that I embalm is not getting good distribution to one or both of the hands below the elbow, something I have not seen in the past. So there is an email from the president of the Pennsylvania Funeral Directors Association. He's having problems in his, seeing unusual clotting in his own corpses, yet they don't want to forward the survey out to their embalmers to tell me.
Unbelievable.
Yeah,
Well, I'm not
it's just,
surprised. I'm not surprised. I've seen, because I'm not just seeing it there. I'm seeing it with nurses associations, doctors associations, medical associations, CDC, FDA. Anything that's counter to the narrative of getting vaxxed is going to be flagged, and it's going to scare the crap out of people.
Now, on the good side, the 125 responses I lost from the Pennsylvania embalmers last year, I made more than made up for. Like I said, this year we had 301 responses. Other states like Alabama, Florida, Louisiana, Tennessee, Texas, and Utah, they picked up the slack and they provided more answers to overcome that deficit. So, like I said, I had 301 responses this year. In fact, the Tennessee Funeral Directors Association, their president, Mr. Taylor Moore, invited me to come speak this summer to their conference in person when all the embalmers and funeral directors gather. So I'll be addressing them and with the results of my surveys, and then opening up for questions, of course, if they want to ask questions. So that's good news, right? The dam is starting to break. Some of the associations are starting to realize that this problem's not going away. And the reason I say it's not going away is in this latest survey that just wrapped up a month or so ago, 83% of the embalmers responding say they're seeing the white fibrous clot. And they're seeing them in an average of 27.5% of their corpses. So it went back up again, which kind of shocked me. I was hoping it would go down like we talked about earlier, like 10%, because I figured, most people took their jabs way back in 2021.
Right.
Took the first, 80% of American adults over the age of 18 took the first 2 jabs back in 2021. Only about 20% of American adults over the age of 18 took the BA4, BA5 bivalent Omicron booster in the fall of 2022. And only about 10% of American adults over the age of 18 took the XBB 1.5 booster that came out in the fall of 2023. So I was expecting, as we get further and further away from people taking the jabs, that we might start to see the percentage of corpses with the white fibrous clots to go down. But we did not. It's jumped back up. And one of the reasons I think that may be happening is because it may take anywhere from 2 or 3 years for these white fibrous clots to grow to the size where they eventually then do, block an artery or vein. So that's a theory we have based on the data we've gotten. So,
and I suspect that how long it would take to develop would maybe depend on other comorbidities, or am I off there?
It could, yeah.
Good. Okay.
One of the things they're actually investigating is blood type, believe it or not. It appears that blood type O may be the best one in terms of not getting the clots, whereas type AB may be the one that may be most susceptible to these clots forming. So I don't want to scare your audience members that have type AB blood.
I don't think most people know what their blood type is anyways. I don't know mine.
I do, because I was in the military. You have the dog tags.
We're Italian, so they used to say our blood type was ragu. What department is in charge of embalming association? Who do they report to?
Well, they have to get a formal license. They have to go to mortuary school. And most embalmers, when they go to mortuary school, you can get a funeral director's license about the same time as you can with an embalmer's license and take the same courses. So a lot of them do both. A lot of funeral directors are actually funeral directors that are embalmers. A lot of embalmers are actually embalmers that are also funeral directors. And some of them gravitate toward, like Richard Hirschman has gravitated totally towards being an embalmer. Woody Wilson, who we mentioned earlier, the president of the Ohio Embalmers Association, does both. But then there's other funeral directors, they don't do any embalming anymore. So when we send out the survey, by the way, we always say that we want only the active embalmers to take the survey. We don't want, inactive. We don't want people that have been working on corpses the last, 4 or 5, 6 years to take the,
Okay.
Another phenomenon,
go ahead.
Another phenomenon they're seeing, Dean, that the embalmers asked me to put on the survey last year, so we did, is a phenomenon called microclotting. And microclotting, the embalmers don't describe it as that. They describe it as what looks like coffee grounds or dirty blood. As they're trying to drain the blood off the corpse and get the formaldehyde in, they see what looks like coffee grounds in the blood as it's coming out. And this is an indication of another phenomenon called microclotting, which can be just as dangerous as the large white fibrous clots, because the microclotting occurs at the capillary level, and it blocks the exchange of oxygen at the lungs and then the carrying of that oxygen to all your major organs of the body. We talked earlier about your brain, your eyes, etc. So
And
just
you asked that question specifically as well about how many had seen the coffee grinds.
yes, yes. And in this year's survey, 78% of the embalmers responding said they saw the microclot in the coffee grounds, and they were seeing that in 22% of their corpses. So one out of every five corpse. And by the way, this is a phenomenon they used to see prior to COVID and the vaccines, but it was much less than 5% of their corpses. Typically, in patients that had heavy chemotherapy, you'd find
Mm.
coffee grounds once in a while. But now they're finding, like I said, 22% of your corpses. So that's at least a quadrupling of that phenomenon. So now we have this brand new phenomenon of the white fibrous clots that embalmers never saw prior to COVID or the vaccines, and also this quadrupling of the microclotting effect as well. So as Richard Hirschman likes to say, the blood has changed.
Wow. So if government says, you know what, this is an issue, and we want all of the embalmers and all of these associations right now to report to us because we want to get more information, who would be responsible for doing that? Is like what department is in charge
It
of
should
that?
be
What
the
government?
FDA. Yeah, the FDA
The
and the
FDA?
CDC
Okay.
should work together. The Food and Drug, they should, right? Because
Yeah. So
they're
already
supposed to be.
I'm already
Yeah,
skeptical then.
me too, because they're supposed to be having our best interest at heart, the people, right? In the UK, for example, like it's the MHRA, Medicines and Healthcare Regulatory Agency. In Australia, it's called the TGA, the Therapeutic Goods Administration. These are the organizations that are like our FDA. They're supposed to be looking out on behalf of their populations, the people, to make sure that whatever big pharma drugs are pushed out there are safe and effective before they're released to the public. And they've all fallen down in their jobs. They really have.
Yeah, although I have to disagree with you. The vaccine was both safe and effective, and it gets rid of this too that I'm trying to get rid of. It is
Our YouTube folks out there?
just like see, I had a different perspective when I didn't I lost my job as well, by the way, and got rehired,
Oh,
interestingly enough. But the reason why I didn't get it had nothing to do with medical reasons. Nothing. I had no skepticism about the vaccine. It was I didn't care. To me, it was just the point that I had already had it.
mm-hmm.
So, and I had the real one, like the first one, and it was serious. Like I lost 30 pounds, right?
Oh, you have the alpha variant? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
So Omicron comes around. It's nothing. It's a
Yes,
cold.
wow.
And they're telling everybody to get it. And I'm like, excuse me, why do I need to get it if I already got it? Why can't I choose not to get it? And that is when I just basically lost it. And I said, this to me is not a medical issue. This is an issue about bodily autonomy. And when people are like, well, you have to take it because of grandma and grandpa. And then that's when I started saying, whoa, okay, now I'm going to start asking questions because everything you're saying makes no sense. Right.
Absolutely. Yeah, natural immunity. You're very strong in your position on
And
that.
guess what? The CDC and the FDA confirmed that years later.
Right.
So we know that the FDA lied. We know the CDC lied. And we know that the government got the media to lie. They got Mike Zuckerberg to shut people down. They got Jack, whatever his name was, Jack Smith at Twitter to shut people down, to silence them, to cancel them. People lost their jobs. This was a horrific era in our history, but we're still kind of in it. So a lot of people haven't really turned yet, have they?
No, they haven't. And there's still a kind of a major suppression going on out there of the information because, like I said, I think a lot of people there's a lot of pride here. A lot of people have stopped taking the vaccines, but like as you said earlier, they don't want to admit it to you publicly, do they? They don't want to say,
Yeah.
you know what, I made a mistake. I shouldn't have done that. They say, let's forget about it. Let's move on. But
Let's
then,
move on. I'm tired of talking about it. I'm tired of
but the
talking
problem
about it.
is all the government apparatus is still in place to do it to us
Exactly.
again.
Thank you. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
Exactly. Nothing's changed. Because when the bird flu comes along, everything, the framework will be there again.
Right. Put the mask
Right?
back on.
The
Take the bird
masks.
flu jab. Here's your passport so
Yeah.
you can travel or you can go to a restaurant.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because the politics got so wrapped up in the medicine, right? How many people, and you can go watch the videos of people in media saying, if Donald Trump, this is when Donald Trump was in office, he goes, if Donald Trump comes out with a vaccine, I'm not taking it. People would come out and say that. And it
Yeah.
was okay to say that, by the way.
Yeah. Until Joe Biden and Kamala took
Right.
office. It went 180 degrees the opposite.
Yeah.
Take this or
Yeah.
else. Yeah, so
Yeah.
it was bizarre.
It's
But
nuts. So what's next for you? What's next on your agenda? You got any talks coming up? You
well,
going anywhere?
I'm going to go to CPAC in a few weeks, so
Okay.
that'll be
When is
interesting.
that? Just so
That's I think February 20th through the 22nd
okay.
at Gaylord Convention Center in National Harbor, Washington, D.C. So that'll be fun. And we'll make sure that, like I said, people see the clots. They're going to be out there, and I'm going to be as visible as I can. In terms of the embalmer seeing the clot, that's one thing. And people say, okay, so you're seeing these clots in the dead. Well, guess what? We're seeing them in the living as well. I had a whistleblower come to me in March of this last year. He's a cardiologist and endovascular specialist who works in Jacksonville, Florida. And he told me that he's been removing these same white fibrous clots from living people for the last 4 years. Yes. And also, there's a YouTuber, Dr. Philip McMillan, who runs a channel called Vegan Health, Vejon, and he's found his own separate cath lab whistleblower, also in the United States, who says he's been removing anywhere between 3 to 10 white fibrous clots per week out of people in his one cath lab alone. Yeah, you think about it, there's over 1,700 cath labs across the United States. So if you do the multiplication, if you take the low number 3 per week and multiply times 17, that's 5,000 of these white fibrous clots per week taken out of
Oh,
cath
wow.
labs.
Do they show up on X-rays or MRIs?
They have a hard time showing up sometimes on X-rays and MRIs because, as we showed earlier in one of the early photos you showed, they actually take on a cast of that portion of the vascular system, so they can be. It's hard to see them sometimes. Yeah, but
And they
so
don't know what they're looking
radiology,
for yet because it's relatively new.
right? The last 4 years,
Right.
correct. But the scary thing about this cath lab whistleblower that Dr. McMillan had is he says that, unlike the embalmers that we talked about earlier, who may or may not have access to the COVID vaccination records, these doctors do. These endovascular surgeons, vascular specialists, cardiologists, they have access to the COVID vaccination records of all their patients. And this cath lab whistleblower, Dr. McMillan, says that whenever he finds the white fibrous clots, 99% of the time that person's been jabbed with anywhere between 1 to 8 jabs. And the more jabs they've taken, the worse the problem seems to be. So what I did, Dean, is based upon that information, I said, well, I think I need to do a survey similar to the one I did for the embalmers with cath lab workers, vascular surgeons, endovascular specialists, cardiologists, radiologists, anesthesiologists, these people that work in these catheterization labs, nurses too, and see how prevalent the white fibrous clots are, in a survey that I do with them. So I devised a survey similar to the one I did for the embalmers, and I sent it to the societies for vascular surgery in different countries, the United States, Canada, UK, and Australia. And none of them bothered to even respond to my request except for one, and that was the U.S. Society for Vascular Surgery, located in Rosemont, Illinois. That's where they're headquartered, and they have over 6,300 members. Here's a email I got back from them. I don't know if your folks can see that or not. You can see the SVS symbol on there. In their email they sent back to me, they declined to take the survey, unfortunately, citing some kind of lame, wimpy
It's a
reason.
survey. You're not asking for personal information.
I know. Yeah, exactly. But they declined to take the survey, which is unfortunate because zero of these, and I also sent it to actually the same way I did with the embalmer survey. I looked up the email addresses for about 200 vascular surgeons, and I sent the email directly to them. Didn't get any answers from them either. The doctors are tight-lipped about it. So I said, well, wait, if I can't get good information from the doctor end, maybe I can get good information from the patient end. So I created a 2024 People's Blood Clot Survey, and I sent that out. I actually went on Dr. Campbell's show, and also Clayton Morris and his wife Natalie have a show called Redacted News.
Yes,
Went
redacted.
on, yeah, I went on Redacted, and Dr. Campbell, and I had them display a QR code to do for this survey. And there's the QR code for the survey. And very quickly, Dean, I got over 1,400 responses from people who either themselves or somebody they knew had blood clotting issues since January of 2020. I wanted to capture what happened in 2020, which is the year that we had COVID but no vaccines yet.
Mm.
So I wanted to see what was, if there was any difference between that year and the years where we had COVID and the vaccines. And guess what? Big difference. One of the first questions was, I said, what years, plural, did you or your person that you know have their clotting problem? Out of the 1,400 that responded, about 80 of them said they had a problem in the year 2020, the year we had COVID but no vaccines yet. But then the numbers for 2021 through 2024 went up to over 500 each of those years. So it
Wow.
jumped from 80 in 2020 to over 500 in 2021, over 500 in 2022, 23, and 24. So that's telling me quite clearly that there's a problem with the vaccine, right? Because that huge increase.
What do you
Other
think?
questions we asked, by the way, were did the person with the clots take the COVID-19 vaccine? Out of the 1,400 that responded, 1,300 of them said yes. Only about 100 said no. So, and then we asked them, one of the things that gave me good confidence the survey was good is we asked them, what years did you take that you were the person take the vaccines? And it showed most of the people, the longest bar was 2021. And then it got shorter in 2022, even shorter in 2023, and even shorter in 2024, which perfectly matches what the CDC is saying about uptake of the vaccines, right? And what we know, people stop taking them. Another question we asked is how soon did the blood clotting issue develop? And that was kind of interesting. We had about 125 people said less than 2 weeks. Another 118 said between 2 weeks and a month. 320 said between 1 to 6 months. 217 said between 6 months and a year. And 367 said greater than a year. So again, that confirms my theory that it may take a couple of years for these white fibrous clots to grow to the point where they cause a problem. We asked them again, what part of the body did the blood clotting occur in? This is another thing that gave me great confidence that the people responding to the survey were doing so honestly and accurately, because they perfectly matched the CDC's V-Safe system. The CDC had two systems out there, one called VAERS, the Vaccine Adverse Event Reporting System, which most people are familiar with. They had another system, though, called V-Safe, and it was a downloadable app that people could download on their smartphones and then talk about their COVID vaccine experience. And over 10 million Americans downloaded that app. And what was interesting, Dean, is about 8% of them, 800,000 out of the 10 million, actually experienced a severe adverse event that was bad enough that they either had to go to the hospital, emergency room, urgent care, or schedule a doctor's appointment to resolve the issue. But what was interesting is that there was also a free text field in that vSafe database that people could write in more about what their experience was. And CDC was not releasing that to the public. So Del Bigtree and his folks at ICANN, the Informed Consent Action Network, Del Bigtree has that show, The High Wire. They FOIA'd to get that information. And a judge said, yes, CDC, you're going to turn that information over. So they've been doing so in these big tranches of about, hundreds of thousands of records at a time. And I've been going through them. They're in the form of Excel spreadsheets. So when I get them, I take a look and I do a search on the term blood clot. And then I go through and I count where the blood clots were taking place. And guess what? The CDC's, that counting, basically the locations of the blood clots match exactly what the people responding to my survey said. Of the locations, the number one locations they're finding blood clotting issues is in the legs,
Yeah.
particularly deep vein thrombosis. Number two is the lungs, which can be very serious. If those DVTs move, they can form what's called pulmonary embolisms, PEs, and they be very dangerous and be life-threatening. That was the number two location. Number three location was the brain. The number four location is the heart, and then the abdomen, and then other catch-all for like eyes, nose, arms, uterus, etc. But what was interesting is the information supplied by those 1,400 people that responded to my survey, those ordering that 1, 2, 3, 4, legs first, brain second, matched perfectly what the CDC's own vSafe data showed. So it gave me great confidence that the people were not lying on the survey. They were responding accurately. So,
I mean, if we were talking about any other issue, people would say, okay, iron law of parsimony, right? Like, let's look at, this happens and then this changes, whatever we're talking about. So usually what we say is, hey, maybe we should look at this because the timing is right. This is one of the few times in history where everybody, as soon as you bring up a statistic, as soon as you say, hey, guess what? Myocarditis is up, people will jump down your throat and start giving you alternative excuses that
mhm.
usually don't make sense. Like, why not look at if you're looking at the timeline, the biggest difference was COVID and then the vaccine. Those were the two biggest differences in North America, right? Like nothing else changed. There was no, new drug that was developed. There's no new alcohol that was developed. Nothing else changed. It was those two things. So you would think,
Exactly.
let's delve into it as much as possible. Let's put money towards it. Let's put research towards it and figure out what the problem is. But it seems like there's still people that don't really want to know what the truth is.
Yeah, and it's shocking. You're right, and they have something called the Bradford Hill criteria that you use to measure whether effects are happening or not. One of them is there's one of the criteria is reversibility, as we mentioned earlier. If you take the cause away, does the effect start to go away? So
Right, right.
but
I
what's
always like,
what's interesting is at the end of all our surveys, both the embalmer surveys and the people survey, we allow the respondents to we give them an optional text box for comments. And it's optional; they don't have to if they don't want to. But let me read to you a few of the responses we got to this people's blood clot survey. It was kind of interesting. Here's one: My mother had 3 COVID vaccine, all Pfizer vaccines. She was healthy and had a stroke and coded in the hospital and died within 5 days. The funeral director is a good friend of the family's and informed us and showed us the white fibrous clots that were throughout her body. He told us they were seeing a lot of these type of clots while embalming. So here's another one. My mom never had clotting issues before this incident. Then only 2 weeks after receiving the COVID shot, she was taken to the ER for multiple clots that had developed in the same arm she received the COVID shot. Here's one from inside the industry. Surgical nurse working in a hospital. Surgical nurse seeing a huge increase in clots. We are doing more amputations than I've seen my whole career. I'm definitely seeing the clots you were describing. When I say it's probably due to the COVID shot, everyone ignores me and there's silence in the operating room. I also hear the surgeons saying, I've never seen this before. Also, during heart surgeries, the surgeons are having a difficult time suturing as the tissues are just falling apart. Once again, the surgeons are saying, I've never seen anything like this before. A lot of patients are dying. Let me read you one more, Dean.
yeah, give it to me.
I was feeling fine, had pain left side below shoulder blade, started sweating and feeling weak. Called the ambulance. ECG did not show heart attack. Rushed to emergency. ECG did not show heart attack. Third different emergency. Doctor did an ECG and an ultrasound. They were all still perplexed. A cardiologist was called. I was sent to a heart institute. Arriving there, I went into cardiac arrest. Was out 2 minutes. 3 sets of compressions and 4 defibrillator shocks were used. They went in through an artery at the wrist. They removed fibrous clot. They did not want to tell me, but a nurse whispered to me, it's the vaccine. We have so many. Follow-up appointment with the cardiologist. I asked the question directly. Doctor looked down and said, I cannot talk about it at the risk of losing my job. What do you think of that, Dean?
What I'm thinking is, for those who are going to say, and rightly so, this is anecdotal, I would say the point isn't the evidence. The point is, look, people are shutting themselves up. People are self censoring because of this. That's the scariest part to me. Because when people like doctors and people in positions of power self censor, you're not doing your job now. You're basically turning your back on the patients. That's the part that bothers me the most is the self censorship. The part that
Yeah,
I can't tell you anything. I can't tell you anything.
right. And we actually asked a few questions about that in our most recent embalmer survey. We asked one question. Question 5 said, do other embalmers that you talk to say that they're seeing the large whitish fibrous structures clots? Out of the 301 embalmers, Dean, 185 said yes. When I talked to other embalmers, they say that they're seeing the clots too. You know, only 50 said no. There were 66 embalmers that said we don't even talk about this. So it's like, what, are they not interested? Are they too afraid? Has their funeral home given them instructions you're not to talk about this at the risk of losing your job?
Yes.
It's one of the other things we asked them, are you members of a professional embalmer or funeral director association? And over 80% of them are. So that set me up for the last question I asked them. Okay, well, is your funeral director association talking about these white fibrous clots? And of those, of the 301, only 52 of the embalmers, less than 20%, said their associations talking about these either at their, they usually have either a annual or biannual get together in person. They also have monthly or quarterly newsletters they send out, but they're not talking about this topic in their newsletters or in their in-person meetings. It's just bizarre.
And you would think people in embalming, like, first of all, so I've never met too many of them. I met one. They must have a great sense of humor, no? Like, aren't they a little bit like you would think they'd be a little bit outside of normal society, anyways? You'd think they'd be a little bit more. I don't know. They just the line of work that they're doing. I mean, you're dealing with dead bodies all day.
Yeah. But I think you can see from talking about both the embalmers and funeral directors
Yeah.
and the vascular surgeons and cardiologists and endovascular specialists that there is still a very uh, deep amount of reluctance to talk about this issue. And unless these people talk about it, we don't know what's happening, as I said earlier, because they're the only ones that see what's going on inside veins and arteries of people, both living and dead.
People's lives are at stake, and people are just shutting up. It's quite disgusting. I'd like to, but I understand it, by the way, because I saw, a single mom who's teaching didn't want to take it, who basically I could see how it wrecked her life, because this was her livelihood at stake. So I get it. And doctors, when people are like, oh, these doctors, you got to stand up. You got to remember, most doctors don't go to school in their own country, in their own state or province, because they can't get in because they want that international tuition. So they're $500,000 in debt. Do you think somebody that's $500,000 in debt is going to risk getting their medical license away? Of course not.
Yeah.
So I always like to what I did with Dr. McCullough and Dr. Bhattacharya. I always like to bring it back to the personal. How is your life? I'm sure did you lose friends? Did people? They
Oh,
must have
yeah.
called you every name in the book, right?
Yeah. Yeah. People were a little bit concerned about me because after I got fired from my job, people said, "Tom, why did you do that for? Why did you throw away your good job?" And I said, "Well, out of principle, like you did, because I'm not taking an experimental drug, because you can't take it out once it goes in. I just thought that was a total violation of your bodily autonomy. And if they can tell you that you have to take an experimental drug, what can't they tell you? I figured at that point, then, so to me, that was the hill to die on. What I did after that, Dean, is I actually, between the fall of 2021 and the fall of 2022, when I watched that Died Suddenly movie, I actually spent some time out on a busy street corner in Dayton, Ohio, close to the Air Force Base, with a big sign saying "No Vax Mandate." And I had a bullhorn with me as well. So, we were getting calls from
Yeah.
my wife's girlfriends were calling, "Hey, what's wrong with Tom?
What's
What's going
wrong?
on with Tom?"
I'm worried
Yeah,
about them.
yeah. I thought he was
Oh
this,
man.
real conservative major
Yeah.
guy,
Yeah.
and now he's down in the corner and he's got this bullhorn, and he's got this giant sign. What was interesting though, Dean, is I saw a good example of what Matthias Desmet calls the mass formation psychosis.
Yes. Yes.
You know, it was a huge intersection. There was a Red Lobster and a Walmart and a Olive Garden, Best Buy.
Yeah.
Four lanes going each way, two turn lanes. And I was there for maybe like 5 hours a day for 120 days over that year period. So I probably saw about 500,000 cars go by me during the whole time I was out there. And I'd say out of every about 100 cars, about 60 of them would do nothing. The people were just too busy in their day. They didn't care. Another 20 would honk their horn or give me a thumbs up or say, "Right on, man. You should make your own choice, right?" But then there was this 20% who hated me. They gave me the middle finger, said "F you, you're killing grandma." One of them or even tried to like pretend they were coming over to hit me. They would swerve the
Oh, I
car a little
believe it.
bit. Or the guy.
Mm.
So, but the main reason I was out there was to support the troops at the Air Force Base that were still being, given these mandates. And I was also hopeful that maybe there might be a mom or two that would decide not to jab up their kid based upon my, seeing my commitment to, because I would give facts with my bullhorn, and it was easy. Every week something else was coming out about bad about the vaccines. Like there was a point in early fall of 2022 where I think Joe Biden had COVID, his wife had COVID, Fauci had COVID, Rochelle Lewinsky from the CDC had COVID, Albert Bourla had COVID, and then they all took Paxlovid 2 weeks later, and they all got COVID again.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I would tell it to these people, and just say,
Yeah.
and I knew
But
there
we
would
never said it was going to stop transmission,
yeah.
Major Tom. We never said that, which is a lie. Jimmy Dore just showed a 20-minute video of all the people that said it would stop transmission. And by the way, I'm predicting this video gets taken down, by the way, on YouTube. It's going to get taken down. I don't give a shit, but we'll put it on Rumble. But here's the thing, on YouTube right now, you can lie and say that it does stop transmission. It stops it cold, and you will not get taken down. Wow. So obviously misinformation is not the problem. The problem is control. That's all it is. It's about control.
What if after a whole year of holding that sign, even into the early fall of 2022, that 20% that hated me still hated me.
Exactly.
I could not convince them to change their mind. I could tell them any fact about, and they would still say, get the jab anyways. And I said, well, wait a minute. Only 20% of you are getting the jabs now. You don't even believe your own story, right? You want me to get the jab and this guy over here to get the jab, but you're not taking the next one yourself.
Exactly. It's like that Seinfeld episode where George doesn't want to eat the chocolate cake because he knows what goes on in the kitchen. They go, if you're one of us, you will eat the cake.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly.
Oh, man. Well, so you're going to keep on with the surveys, right?
I'm going to keep on. I have to because the
you
CDC
have to. Somebody has to.
won't do it. Somebody's got to do it. I don't want to. It's not like I really wanted to do it, but until further notice.
Listen, one of the great, we were talking about, people standing up. So on one side, we had people standing up, doctors, scientists, people like you. But we have to give a shout out to the independent journalists, the people that aren't on CNN, MSNBC. These are people like, Glenn Greenwald, Jimmy Dore. And Jimmy Dore isn't even he's not a journalist. He's a self-described pothead comedian that sounded so sane and lucid. He more than anybody else. And you had Kim Iverson, who lost her job because of it. So there are good people out there. There are honest people. And all they did was ask questions. They didn't even say, don't take the jab. They didn't say stop the vax, which you are saying, by the way, even though YouTube says that it's safe and effective. So I think we're just broken and we got to somehow get it back. And maybe RFK Jr. can do it. Is he going to be confirmed or not? What's your prediction?
I have no prediction at this point. I'm sitting on pins and needles, Dean. I'm hoping it gets confirmed.
Yeah, I mean, if it was just a matter of partisanship, you would say yes, but there are going to be Republicans that are bought off by our big pharma, and they may say no. Dr. J, should that be an easier one?
I think probably yes. Than RFK Jr. Yeah,
I'm glad I got the interview with him before he became a big shot. Now I'm never going to get a hold of him.
Well done, and kudos to you for putting these kind of people on your platform, Dean. Really.
Well, I mean, they don't need me. I mean, I get a few views, but I just anything we can do to help. We're all part of the same team, I guess. So listen, I wish you good luck. We'll talk again in the future. We're going to keep in touch. And I definitely want to, I'm going to get a hold of Richard, the embalmer from Alabama, Roll Tide. We'll definitely get that.
I got one more thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
If people want to follow my work, they can go to my assistant, Laura Kasner, Laura.
Send me the link and I'm going to put it right in the thing.
Okay, great.
But give it to us again. Give it to us again, but I'm going to put it in the link. Give it to us again.
It's Laura Kasner.substack.com, and the name of our Substack is called Clotastrophe. It's a play on the word catastrophe. So you can go there, you can see the results of all our surveys, you can see some pretty spectacular photos of the clots, other articles like meeting Tucker Carlson, etc.
And
So,
Substack has tons of great people. And I think Max Blumenthal's on there, Aaron Mate's on there, Glenn Greenwald, Dave Smith, a whole bunch of people are on there.
yeah,
People just asking questions,
just asking questions.
asking
That's right.
questions.
And that really was my objective, to get the FDA and the CDC to get off their rear end and investigate this, to see if there is indeed a link between the COVID-19 vaccines and these unusual clotting phenomena, these white fibrous clots and the microclotting. Yeah, I'm just like I said, retired Air Force
Yeah.
major. They
Because if there is another reason, then tell me what that reason is. If it's because we're eating too much sugar, then is it that? If it's because we're going to restaurants, I don't care. I just want to know what the reason is. But what I don't want to hear is we're not allowed to say anything. We're not allowed to ask questions.
Amen.
That is really
Yeah.
annoying.
Well
So,
said.
with regard to that, thank you very much. I'm going to press pause here and say goodbye to you off camera. So, to everyone, this has been Major Tom Haviland, and we have to support people like this that that put themselves out there. All right. So, goodbye to to Major Tom Haviland. All right, folks. I hope you enjoyed that. It'll probably get taken down on YouTube. Who cares? I'm not censoring anyone. Be good, be safe, and we'll talk to you later. Cheers.